Hey everybody, Adam Savage. I'm in one of my favorite places, a wood shop, specifically the wood shop at the National Park Service Museum Conservation Labs with Daisy. How are you?
Hello, doing well.
Tell me what we're looking at here. Why are we looking at 3 chairs on this bench? What's your project here?
Yeah, so the project involves all 3 chairs, but mostly the outer 2. These are a set of kind of mismatched chairs. Those 2 are the same, this one's mismatched, from Harpers, Ferry National Historical Park.
Okay.
Just down the road from where we are now. They belong to the Freewill Baptist Church there. So the curator wanted me to take a look at them, kind of show them some love, refresh them a little bit. But the fun twist is that I got to play with a chair that was being deaccessioned. So being released from the collection, which is this middle guy here.
Yes.
So that worked out well for me in these treatments because there was a couple missing components. So there was one missing stretcher down here from this chair, and then a few missing spindles from the end chair.
So you were able to use the parts from the deaccession chair to fulfill those.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah, which is
wow.
a really kind of rare and wonderful opportunity to get the exact materials from the exact time range from the thing that you're trying to recreate.
And so you're taking a 100-some-odd-year-old piece of wood and cutting into it, which is totally amazing, because it looks so fresh in there.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, exactly. It was also a fun problem-solving challenge. You might notice the specificity of that cut. I had a unique challenge in that chair. I could not remove the bow, so this outer part of the chair. I had to find a way to sneak these spindles into place without removing the bow.
Oh, so you did a dupe. Clever. That is amazing.
Yeah, with our friend the jeweler saw, which we've spoken about today.
You love that as a solution.
It's my
Have you ever
friend.
made lunch with a jeweler's saw?
Oh, I'm inspired now. Yeah.
When I first learned about a cordless portable bandsaw, I started using it so much I made a joke that I make my lunch on this thing. And then then there begs the choice of what glue to use?
Yeah, so we use a lot of high-tack fish glue in wooden artifacts conservation, which is in that bottle there. Super sticky stuff. It kind of also follows the theme that protein glue would have been used originally on these objects when they were made. So it remains water-soluble, it holds up well over time, and it's just really good at sticking stuff together, especially wood.
And so just a little bit of water and a little bit of humidity and maybe some heat and it releases its bond.
Yeah, it gets a little old and crackly over time, which might involve things like we use acetic acid to kind of loosen things up a little more sparingly because it can be scary to introduce that into an organic object. But yeah, over time, the proteins kind of the polymers in there kind of cross-link and change properties. But yeah, it remains pretty reversible and pretty sticky.
Did you have the similar issues with getting the stretcher in here?
So this chair, at one point we had, dozens of chair parts just kind of floating around in the lab because pretty much all except for the back bow, we were able to disassemble the legs, the stretchers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all these joints were kind of loose and needed some love anyway. So they were able to just introduce some warm water, some acetic acid, knock them apart, and then put fresh glue in there and put them back together. So that was really exciting.
That's got to be super fun. First to take it all apart and to look at these joints for the first time in in 100 years, and then, God, putting them back together and having it removing the clamps must be like Christmas.
Yes, it is. And the clamping systems alone, I wish we had something set up to show you, but it's just a menagerie of clamps. There's clamps on clamps.
Yes.
There's one clamp we got here just to clamp another clamp to it, which is wonderful.
That's the answer to the age-old question, how many clamps do you need in the shop? 5 more than you currently have.
How many clamps do you need? Yes.
How rare is it that you get some actual pieces to work with that are from the same collection?
This is the first time I have gotten to work with a situation like that. So it's maybe, super, super unique.
Will you guys then save the other parts of this in your library in case they might be useful again?
That is a question for the curator.
Okay.
So yeah, deaccessioning museum objects is kind of a curious situation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know much about it, that process in different institutions.
I work with the Smithsonian, and it's so difficult, they pretty much don't ever do it.
Yeah, it is. It's really legally, the logistics are tricky.
What makes them tricky?
It's just kind of an ethical debate. Like, we can't sell this thing because that's like a way of profiting off of it. And, to deaccession it in the first place, there has to be a really good reason why you're getting rid of it. Either it's not valuable to the collecting mission of the institution, or, it's in some kind of irreparable condition where no amount of conservation effort would kind of bring it back to, an interpretable state. So there's a lot that surrounds it that's really tricky.
And balancing that with its rarity and its history and its story.
Cultural
fascinating.
value,
And you also don't want to deaccession it and have someone pick it up and immediately put it on eBay.
Exactly, which is why a lot of deaccession collection objects, this is a tricky subject, but they get destroyed. They get incinerated, so they can't fall, into other hands, or the ethical conditions won't continue. So yeah, it's
we need
really
a museum of broken things.
Yes, exactly.
It's like the island of lost toys. So I'm also curious, if you didn't have access to the chair, would you have turned, it's one of these spindles, am I right?
Yeah. So
would you have turned one yourself?
Yeah, I would have. Which I was kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, an excuse to play on the lathe.
When you would if you would do something like that, would you, I'm just going to hazard a guess, Daisy, that you would use a piercing saw to make yourself a pattern.
Oh.
And then use the pattern to do the turning.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, you're thinking like me now.
I'm
Any
trying
excuse
just
to use
put
a jeweler's
myself
saw.
in exactly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think I would rely a lot on my trusty calipers just to make each of those measurements of the beads and kind of map it out before I turned it.
It is the pattern matching to that fidelity is the most difficult kind of replication, I imagine.
Yeah, I try to avoid it when I can.
So where are these in their restoration? How much work is left on these?
Yeah, these are completely after treatment. So I have the before treatment images below.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, so this had a really gnarly split in one of these kind of laminated boards here that we were able to clamp back into place, which was very exciting. It was completely immobile at this stage. We really didn't think we were going to get it to move much, but again, the magic of warm water and well-placed clamps.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I love this idea of joining. I'm curious how it occurred to you.
Yeah, it was kind of an accident, actually. The chair told me about it itself because the way that one of the spindles had broken was that Z shape. It broke through the bead, along the grain there.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
So it went through a weakness, exploited another weakness, found its way out a third weakness.
Yeah, exactly. So I looked at that. I thought that has a lot of gluing surface area. It's going to come together in two parts, just like I need it to slip in between the bow.
Because what you don't ever want to have to, I'm realizing this, right, a spindle, drilling a hole in one end and another end, they're never ever going to line up. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, jeweler saw makes a very fine kerf, so it comes back together like a dream.
So cool. I love how these projects permanently change our perception of that object.
Exactly.
Daisy, this is so thrilling. Thank you so much for walking me through it. Thank you guys so much for watching. One of my favorite things we make in our tested store are demerit badges. These are like scout badges, but for screwing stuff up, because screwing up is not just a part of the making process, it is intrinsic to it, and we like to celebrate that. We've got 27 so far in the Supervisors bundle that you can go buy right now by clicking on the link in the description, but we also have a booster pack of some brand new patches. This is the demerit badge for burning off your eyebrow. I am proudly sewing that to all of my clothes. This is the demerit badge for having a messy workbench, which I do not get today. My workbench is super clean. And we have new octagonal patches that are, merit badges. This is the merit badge for sweeping up your shop. Congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And this, oh my God, this is great. This is the merit badge for creating a clean space on your bench. Hey, we got to take our successes where they come and meet them there. Go to the tested-store.com or adamsavage.com to buy any of these, or click on a link in the description.